to the Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on the Kim B. Davis Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have LaShawn Erby, President and CEO of One in a Billion Consulting. She is an Ally Actualizer. She's going to talk to us tonight about 3 community actions that she's working on: Staying Alive, the Poor People's Campaign, and I knew I was going to forget the third one, farming. Housing and farming, which are local initiatives. Good evening, LaShawn. How are you?
Good evening. I am well. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Thank you, LaShawn, for coming on. All right, so let's get right down to it because we have so much to talk about. There's so much happening in government. The second impeachment trial started today, which was full of theatrics. January 6th happened. But first off, you call yourself an Ally Actualizer. What is that?
Well, I am so glad you asked that question because I am actually America's #1 ally actualizer. And what that means is I help people who want to be allies actually become them. I do that through transformational coaching and some other things, but I really, really love to work with people and help them get to the next level of being advocates, allies, and advocates for those who need them.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we're going to talk about your actions, but I want to start with January 6th. So on January 6th, we were progressing towards our inauguration. We had gotten through our election. We had gone through multiple legal challenges, all kinds of shenanigans we saw. And then on January 6th, when Congress was supposed to go ahead and approve everything in the election and everything should have been settled, we saw thousands of people crash the Capitol. They were looting, they were rioting, they brought bombs and zip ties, and they were looking for people. And we hear the stories now of some of the things that people were chanting and how they built gallows. And we saw them on the scaffolding, and we saw them in other places. And we sat there as Black Americans thinking, "Oh my God, what's happening? This is cool." But as a community activist, as a person, we've worked together before. And so both of us understand how to work community, but you are the expert. You've been doing this a lot longer than I have. And explain, because one of the things that I kept hearing from the rioters was, they're stealing my country. This isn't what I wanted. They're not listening to me. Why is community activism important? And can you relate it back to a lack of cooperation between communities that sort of pushed January 6th upon the United States? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best to answer that. That was a whole lot in that question, but I'm going to do my best to bring it back around. So first of all, yeah, like I don't think there's a Black person alive that saw that that happen on the Capitol that was just not like completely baffled.
Exactly.
And for those of us who have been involved with political work and community activism, enraged, just the fact, I mean, that house is a people's house.
Yeah.
It was built by slaves.
Yeah.
And for people to denigrate, I mean, like seriously, most people don't even make it over the fence. And so to
Right.
see, I don't know about anybody else, but I kept thinking like, well, when is somebody going to get shot? I mean, that's what happens when we do things.
Mhm.
What's happening? What's happening? What is really happening? But yeah, so you did a really good job of summing it up because it does have to come does come back to being frustrated, not being able to be heard. But that is the experience that we've experienced, and we haven't stormed the Capitol to do that because that's not the right way to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the root of it all, I mean, we would be remiss without just saying that this country was built on white supremacy, a white supremacy culture. And in a white supremacy culture, there are some things that are just allowed by some cultures, by some people, and not allowed by others.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, and I'll just say this too, it was personally nerve-wracking to me because I have a daughter. I don't have a biological daughter, but I have a lot of movement daughters. And one of my movement daughters actually works on Capitol Hill. So I was concerned about her.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that the congresswoman that she works for had enough foresight to tell them not to go to work that day. So she was not one of the people crouched and hiding and those sorts of things. But it was just really terrible. We do know that the voices of I think Martin Luther King was the one who said that the people riot because they're not being heard.
Yeah.
But it's not actually the same thing when you actually have the power to do it. Now, white privilege is being able to go in and into the Capitol and do all these illegal things, and you get welcomed in to do them. And many people have not paid any price for that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there's no way in the world our community could, or the BIPOC community, period, could get away with doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, but if I didn't, ask it again.
No, you did.
Okay.
But explain how community activism works to connect government, in terms of policies, legislators, officials, and the community, in making sure that communities' needs are heard, so that we
Yes, that's
right.
excellent. We have to unite our voices, and so one of the things that I love about organizing is that there has so many different facets. You have political organizing, you have community organizing, and I have a political organizing. My original background is more political organizing, and I just became more in the last 8 years more active in community organizing. But it all has to do with relationships. Everything is about relationships.
Yeah.
And then also understanding that the political process, that when someone is elected to office, that is the beginning. That's like the interview for the job. The job hasn't happened until they've gotten into office. So then it becomes the responsibility of the people who have put the person in office to hold them accountable for their actions. And if they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, then there need to be some repercussion. So that if I could just slide right into talking about the Poor People's Campaign.
Yes, please.
That's exactly what we're doing. So the Poor People's Campaign, for those of you who may not know, it was the last organizing effort of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was assassinated. He was bringing people together across racial lines, across religious lines, to form a moral fusion movement to bring people up economically. And so we actually believe that he was assassinated because he was bringing people together in such a large fashion. And so in 2017-18, the Poor People's Campaign was revived again by the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris and the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. And so the Poor People's Campaign and the nonprofit is actually called Repairers of the Breach, because we are repairing a breach. And you will see now Bishop Barber is all over the Biden administration to make sure we get things, because we want to make sure that if poor people are taken care of, everybody's taken care of. Absolutely. And by many standards, you'll hear numbers like 30, 40 million, but there actually were 140 million poor people before the pandemic. Wow. Let me say that again, 140 million poor people before the pandemic, and another 8 million since the pandemic, and that number is continuing to rise. So it's important for us to have people. What I'm excited about the Poor People's Campaign is we were actually able to elevate the word poverty and bring presidential candidates together to talk about the fact that in the 30 years that they'd had debates, no one had ever talked about poverty, and poverty's always been an issue. So to have that elevated into the conversation, and now you hear President Biden talking about how it needs to be part of the moral compass. And so community organizing has a way of picking up and building momentum and building power from the bottom up. One of the things I love about the Poor People's Campaign is the fact that we're everybody in, nobody out. It's not just for Black people. It's not just for white people. It's for people of good conscience. It's not even just for poor people. It's for people of wealth of good conscience, because we know that we have a responsibility to take care of our brothers and our sisters and our siblings. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. So now you have 2 other campaigns. Tell us about those.
Okay, so actually one is part of the same. So we have the National Poor People's Campaign. And then in Lansing, I'm actually the founding organizer for the local campaign here in Lansing. And we're called the Metro Lansing Poor People's Campaign. So we have an amazing leader in the person of Pastor DJ Knox, who is actually my pastor, and he's very active in the Poor People's Campaign. He's also one of the state leaders for the Michigan Poor People's Campaign. And then we have another leader, Tobias, who's the state leader for the Poor People's Campaign, all out in our chapter. And what we have decided to do is to hold our local governmental officials accountable to some demands. For example, we knew just because of the pandemic that there was going to be a housing crisis. So we actually started talking to officials last summer about obtaining some property so that when winter came, people would have places to go. Now, we do have shelters, don't get me wrong, and they do some marvelous work, but they do not serve everyone. If a person has substance abuse issues, they cannot go into those shelters. And there are other religious requirements that sometimes prevent people from using those services, which means, as cold as it is, somebody's sleeping outside. So what we were trying to do was get some property, rehab it, and have it available. We were given the run around here, there, and everywhere, and just decided, we're going to do it ourselves, because we have an apprenticeship program that once we have the homes, we can start rehabbing them. And then we're going to teach people how to own homes, how to take care, how to build their wealth, the whole 9, wraparound services. If they need substance abuse help, like we're working on all of those things. So let me just go ahead and shamelessly drop this website, because we are looking for donations. We want to house people, and we want to house them immediately. So mippc.org, MIPPC, that's Michigan Poor People's Campaign.org. And there is a donation button on there. And we would love to have people help us buy these homes. And we'll also be giving apprentices jobs. They'll be working toward their journeyman's license to, get some experience for the trades. So just all the way around. But then as we have those houses, people will buy those and we'll get more. We had, I think, 10 homes we were looking at, and I think it's down to 9 homes that we were looking at from the land bank that we actually have looked at, and we know what they need. So we're raising money to rehab those. And then we have another exciting project, which has to do with obtaining a school. And the apprentices will then also have an opportunity to do some work there, some much needed hours there. But it is we're in communication with the Lansing School District to obtain this school. It's 3 stories. It has a health clinic in it. It has a mental health clinic with 8 rooms, 8 counseling rooms. It has a swimming pool where we could do some health, some rehab work. And then what we plan to do with the football field is turn it into a full service farm so that people can have healthy food, have a subscription service. We have lots of food deserts, and then we want to replicate that in different parts of the city. So we have a lot going on, and I'm super excited because our chapter is only 1 year old. We turned 1 year old last November, and we've been able to do all this stuff in 1 year with the help of God, because it ain't us. We real clear. We're clear about where our help comes from.
Exactly. All right. So you just unpacked a lot for us. So let's go back. So talking about shelters, and I've had this conversation with people where people will say, well, no one should be sleeping on the streets right now. It's too cold. And I'm like, and in Michigan, COVID is still raging, just like it is around every other place. And when
Right.
you put lots of people together, what happens? You end up having COVID exposures. And the homeless people typically have a higher risk because they're transient and they, move around a lot and they don't have a stationary place to go. You also have issues, which I learned this. Um, One of the organizations that I support helps to find places inside of a shelter for someone if they're looking for it. And one of the things that she said, she didn't want to go to a shelter because they have bed bugs. And I thought about it and I was like, wow, well, it makes sense because if you have a population that moves in and out, of course, whatever ailments, issues that they may have, they're going to bring to them and they may leave them there and then they have to deal with it after these people move on. You hit it on the nail when you said if you have drug abuse, if you have sexual abuse issues, because sometimes you have
Right.
sexual assaults or different types of violence that happens. Things
Mhm.
happen everywhere. This isn't a slight against shelters, but sometimes shelters are not the safest place. It depends on what's going on. The other thing you talked about in terms of having training and education and having a place where people can grow food and have a subscription service and purchasing a home so that someone can have a safe place to lay their head at night. These are all ailments that are society's ills. And, I go back to January 6th because I listen to people, especially people who stormed the Capitol in Michigan, in Lansing, when they brought their guns and they kept talking about how the Democrats were unconstitutional and how the government was trying to enslave them and all these different things. And I was just listening to them going, okay, what are you talking about? Because I know in Detroit, we have 20,000 plus people that are homeless, working homeless that go to work every day but do not make enough money to afford a one bedroom apartment. And so many are sleeping in their cars, in and out of shelters, motels, you name it, whatever the resource that they have to use. The next thing we talk in Detroit about food deserts. And I know I went through a national training for community organizing. And one of the things that someone was talking about it, and I said, well, I can tell you, Detroit is a perfect example of a food desert. There are many communities in Detroit, as well as, in Lansing and Ingham County, where there isn't a grocery store around. The only thing that they have is a party store. And I didn't
Mhm.
realize this until I went to a gas station to get gas and I watched a family, a mother, struggling to buy some bananas that were about to be thrown out. She was paying like $3, $4 for a very small bunch. And this was at the gas station. But as I surveyed the neighborhood, I was like, that is her grocery store. There's no other place for her to buy fruits and vegetables or to buy milk or whatever it is that you need. I didn't realize until a few years ago that people were actually buying food at the dollar store. I was like, who buys food at the dollar store? And then I went to the dollar store and actually saw it and I was like, they're selling food
A
here at
lot
the
of
dollar
people.
store. A
Mhm.
lot of people buy food at the dollar store. But then you hear on the news, baby formula from China contaminated with different particles, and you hear about different things in the foods. And I'm like, these are the same people who are struggling every day, check to check, and this is what they are subjected to. So when we talk
Yes.
about community activism, you have answered that call. You have gone ahead and figured out a way how to solve some of those solutions. Unfortunately, as you said, which is staggering to me, 140 million people in this nation are what is considered in poverty. That is amazing. And we
And
are,
that was before the pandemic.
and that's before the pandemic. But we
Right.
love to say that we are the richest nation on earth. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, Jesus says, "You will not always have me, but you will always have the poor." And I always tell people who say to me, "Well, we shouldn't have all these programs. People need to go to work." I always remind them, I said, "What did Jesus say?" Jesus said, "I won't always be here, but the poor will be." That means you will always have widows. You will always have orphans. You will always have somebody who's down on their luck for whatever reason, whether it's drugs or whether it was something
Yeah.
they made a poor decision or something bad happened to them. it doesn't mean that we can't help.
I
You were
want to
going
share something with you that I just learned about that scripture.
to, okay.
I love it. When Jesus said, the poor you'll have with you always, he said that because he knew we weren't going to be obedient.
Amen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
if you go back in scripture and you think about Jubilee, like
Yeah.
after 7 years, your people aren't supposed to have debt. People are
Right.
supposed to get their stuff back. And
And they're
none of
supposed
those
to be
things
let out of
happen.
jail. Right. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And because
Mm-hmm.
we're not obedient to that,
Mm-hmm.
then we still have poor people. And because we have so much greed,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with earning money as long as your only goal isn't about yourself. You
Exactly.
can earn money to bless people,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when it becomes all about you, then you have a really, really big issue. So yeah, and actually, so one of our co-chairs, our national co-chairs, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, did this whole sermonette. Well, I don't know if it's probably a full sermon. Did a sermon on this, and I actually think there may be a book too, like on that
Wow.
very scripture. Yes, I'll have to get it and share that with you.
Yes, please do. So here's another question I have, because when I went through the national community organizing group, I thought they did an amazing job. I flew to California for a week and got the chance to train with these people that were leaders nationally across the country. However, what I saw was this disconnect between national leadership and grassroots leadership. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand, the ones that are really in the weeds in the community that are fulfilling the everyday needs, that when it sort of comes from a top-down approach, the message sometimes can be diluted.
Yeah. And that's one thing I love about the Poor People's Campaign, because we have autonomy and people do we do have our unified message, our one band, one sound when we're doing our Moral Mondays. But I believe leadership understands that we better understand what's happening in Michigan than they would, but we can still work together, toward the common goal. So, but yeah, you're right. For example, I'm likely to get a call from someone. There's another apartment complex. It's called a Porter Apartments. We actually just did this car caravan to raise awareness around that, because we had a couple deaths in the city, one in the city jail, which would have been kind of covered up, and then another death in the homeless camp. We were talking about that. And what really angered us is the fact that we were trying to be proactive. Well, we were being proactive and trying to get some houses and homes for them back in June. I have documentation in June. And so just recently, though, a young man lost his life because he had a heater in his in the homeless encampment. I think he had a heater in his tent and like suffocated, right? And so it's being on the ground when you actually know those stories and those people. Like there's this apartment complex that has, like you said, bed bugs and roaches and all, and these people have been living, these are disabled seniors living this way forever. And so by being on the ground, you can actually know what people are doing. And it's actually good to be able to have the top and the bottom, so you can kind of be working together, but you can't have one without the other.
Absolutely.
It's pointless. It's pretty pointless. I feel like people who do a top-down approach only are only doing it for show, not really for results. Because if you're not involving the people, the most affected people in the actual action, then you're just being a dictator. And I tell people all the time, especially when I'm training organizers, don't you dare tell people what they need. You
Exactly.
ask people what they need.
And
And then you listen.
Yes.
You listen, and then you act on what you heard. Because some people do all that, but they don't act on what you gotta act on what you heard.
They try to tell you, they listen. Well, what I heard you say was, and this is what we can do. And then somehow you're convinced that what they said they could do is what you needed, but that had nothing to do with what you said. I want you to go back, because you referenced a statistic about homes in Ingham County.
Yes. So,
For
and
homeless people.
Ingham County is the county where I live, and actually, our poverty rate is 20%, and the rental rate is about 42%. 42% of people own renting.
Mhm.
Now that presents issues because of many homes, and I can speak from experience, honey. Many
Mhm.
homes here are toxic. They just are. They're
Mhm.
moldy. They are mildewy. They have lead. They have asbestos. They have, like that place I was telling you about, the porter. They have, some people have bed bugs and all these different things, right? And if you're poor and that's all you got, then you deal with all you got. I'll give you an example. My own life experience. I haven't told anybody this, but I guess everybody gonna know now because we're recording it.
Yeah.
But I'm moving into a house, and I'm moving into a house because the apartment I'm in right now is toxic.
Oh my
I
goodness.
had a leak that started last February, and they literally just came to fix it 8 months later. So,
Wow.
and when they did, they opened up the wall on a Friday and then left the wall open all weekend. So we inhaled all the stuff, and I'm thinking, and I'm an activist. I work with the Lansing Tenants Union. I have, attorneys that I can call. If it's happening to me,
Mhm.
and I can call somebody,
Mhm.
what about the people who can't call anybody? So that's why we need to beef up the troops. We're
Mhm.
always recruiting, wanting people to come in. One
Mhm.
thing I know about as being a community organizer is that a lot of times people only volunteer for about 3 months. That's the life cycle of a volunteer. You might get them to come back, but you by 3 months. So we constantly need people coming in. The need is great. It is
Mhm.
so great. And
Mhm.
sometimes people just need to be encouraged, or somebody needs to be advocated for. One woman made a really good point. She was like, sometimes if a person needs a help, like someone with a voucher needs a help, they may just need somebody to make a call to their supervisor, just to egg, just to care, like care and do something about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. So you mentioned if people, because we know we need people. Volunteers, we know it's only 3 months. And the reason it's only 3 months is because the work is hard. It's not always glitz and glamour. I told people this summer when we saw all those community organizers who were organizing the Black Lives Matter marches, I kept telling people, I said, you need to talk to the people behind them. I said, because there's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes that we don't see. And it was funny because a friend of mine is very much interested in this work as well, and so she does some work in it. And I watched her do this panel, and there was a guy that was there, and I asked him. I said, "What about the sexism that's in
Mhm.
community organizing?" And I know your eyebrow just went up because you know what I'm talking about.
Baby, it's everywhere.
It is. You can't walk into a room and say, "Oh, I'm a community organizer. I'm the blah, blah, blah director, community activist, whatever you are," without a bunch of men looking at you like, I could do better, or, trying to ice you out or whatever it is. So, my question to you is for people that are interested, men and women,
Mhm.
one, how do you get involved? What are some things that you should do to prepare yourself and look forward to? And then, can you speak to, for women, the issue of sexism and how to sort of navigate that? Because that can go a lot of different ways, because you can be considered arm candy if you're cute. They'll put you up front like, yeah, she's cute. We'll put her up front. We'll get attention. Don't let you really say too much. And you'll be like, but wait, they put me up front. You don't understand. It works just like it does everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so let me do that backwards. I'm gonna do that in the reverse order that you asked. Excuse me. With regard to women and sexism, that's everywhere. I actually work for a couple of clergy organizations. Now, I'm not clergy, and I led both of those organizations, so I got a lot of experience in that. Um, what I will say though is that I have a group that I just started on Facebook called Ally Authentic Allies, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about is women finding their voice. I
Mhm.
just got a message today from a woman saying that some other organizers were talking about how challenging it is to have their voices heard, and
Mhm.
she told me that people have been paying attention to my work because I'm able to hold space in places with difficult conversations, because I am.
Mhm.
And I want to teach people how to do that also. Like give up the gaslighting. And
Yes.
we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. And we're not disregarding people's leadership like that. But yeah, the sexism is a real thing. I battle it often, but I have no problem speaking up
Mhm.
either.
That's a good thing. That's what I love about you, LaShawn.
Yeah.
If a point needs to be made and you're in the room, I know it's going to be made.
Bless you for that. You know what? I said something about similar to this conversation,
Mhm.
and the outcome was a whole session on women in ministry. Because I
See.
was like, don't shush me.
Mhm.
Shush me. Don't shush me. I'm not to be shushed.
Right. There we go. There we go. Now, tell us how people can get involved and things that they need to prepare themselves for work in community organizing.
So, depending on where you are, you can either join in with the Poor People's Campaign, or you can start your own chapter. All you need to do is connect with someone. Like, we need people on the ground. My heart was so happy to know that my hometown in Texas now has active Poor People's Campaign. And so that's one thing. You can go to the website, which is poorpeoplescampaign.com, and look for your city. Now, if you're in Michigan, you know what, just go to Michigan Poor People's Campaign and sign up there. But then you could also go to mippc.org, which is that other website I told you about, and sign up there. You can find out some of the things that we're doing, get involved. All of the chapters, we have a chapter in Washtenaw County. We have a whole lot of active people in Detroit. And we do a lot of work with the People's Water Board and with the General Baker Institute. Those are our people. And then we have Metro Lansing. There's some people who are working on some things in Muskegon and hopefully in Oakland County soon. But if you don't have a place, you know what? You can also look for me on Facebook, or you can send me an email at LaShawnErby.com. You can do that too, and we could plug you in, because there's so much work to be done.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, LaShawn, for coming on and explaining and breaking some of our problems and issues down in our community. Now, tell us how you just told us how we can reach you at LaShawnErby.com.
It's
But you
LaShawn at LaShawnErby.com. Yeah, I just set that up. And then also another way to reach me is to go on Facebook and look for Authentic Allies and Advocates. That's a group.
okay.
And come into the group, and we're going to be training people on how to use their voice.
That's wonderful. And then for if someone wants to hire you to run an action for them, how is that 1 in a billion consulting?
The 1 in a billion consulting is the name of my business. The best way to reach me is going to be by email. I'm in the process of moving, so the best right now is just to email me at LaShawn at LaShawnErby.com, and that is spelled LaShawn, and then my last name is Erby, B as in boy, Erby, LaShawnErby.com.
Very good. Thank you so much, LaShawn. I hope that
Thank
you'll come
you.
back on with us and
I'd
talk
love
some
to.
more. Thank you. Because I know it's going to be some more stuff, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about the impeachment trial.
Oh my gosh, we did it. Yeah, we'll have
We
to
did
do
it. We did it. We did it. There's so much to talk about. But quickly, where do you see that going? What do you think is going to happen with the impeachment trial? Share your thoughts.
Well, in full transparency, I just came from a funeral for my family, so I hadn't been paying that much attention, but I did hear that it is constitutional.
Yes.
And I kind of feel like I'm hoping that there will be some Republicans who will do the right thing, because I think it's really important that we seal the deal. Like, that was wrong, and when you let it's kind of like kids. I hate to say it like this, but like, you gotta give kids boundaries. Adults need
Yeah.
boundaries too. You know, they call laws.
Yeah.
They call laws. So, and we've seen just too many times when we have been punished for things that other people haven't. But that is just insurrection. I mean, come on. Like,
Right.
like there's no explaining that away.
They took a lectern out of the people's house. They stole a laptop. You stole mail. You know.
I heard someone defecated on someone's desk. I mean, that's just
ridiculous.
You killed somebody. Come on.
Yes.
So I don't want, because I do know that if he is unpunished, if the people who did that are unpunished, there is a good chance that it could happen again. So, I don't know. Well, we're about the same age, so I'm sure you remember Barney Fife and Bud Nippet. Need to do some Bud Nipping.
Yes, they do. Oh, thank you, LaShawn. This has been a great show.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have you back on another couple of months so we can come back and talk.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for watching the Kim B. Davis Show. I hope you'll tune in for our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.